Yes, born and raised.
Went to App State,
Yep.
then traveled to other smart schools, and ended up in Washington, D.C.
Yes.
What did you do in Washington, D.C.? Where did you make your living in the private sector?
Right. So one of the classes I was enrolled in at App State was actually being used by the intelligence community, unbeknownst to all of us.
Okay.
And the contractor, SAIC, Science Applications International Corporation, came to recruit at App State because they wanted to have people with experience in this software. And when they interviewed us, they explained, hey, do you want to work for the intelligence community? Do you want a security clearance? And before I started college, I actually thought about going to the military, to the Marine Corps. So I always kind of felt like I needed to give back to the community. A little bit. Well, it's the gray hair. I just cut it off. So yeah, I thought it would be a good opportunity to work for the mission and try to make a difference. So I decided to accept the position and move to Northern Virginia, Fairfax originally. I now live in Leesburg, Virginia, but pretty much, Washington, D.C., but then Northern Virginia from Tyson's Corner out to Reston, there's a lot of satellite offices that are government contractors that work out there. So I've been there.
The reason we have you here tonight is because what is the magic event that happens that will bring you here full time?
Well, eventually when my youngest goes to college, I'll be here full time. But I'm an investor in Ohanify, so I enjoy working with those guys and trying to help them kind of achieve their milestone of getting an A round and growing their business. But I also own some real estate in
That's my next question,
Surf City.
How do you go from Ohanify software to owning the Hive in downtown Wilmington? Can you explain why you do real estate investment as in hotels? Why is that also an interest in what you're doing?
So when I sold my first software company in 2009, I had to take some time off between starting my second company due to non-compete.
Yep.
So I joined a local venture capital group in Tyson's Corner to kind of learn the ropes on how to do venture investing. So when I started my second software company in 2000,
age is this? How old are you at this point?
mid-30s.
Okay.
Yeah. So when I started my second software company in 2012, I ran the investment, kind of the side hustle, I guess you can say, and the software company in parallel. And I did that for about 5 or 6 years, and I got kind of burned out because by this time I was making investments in other companies, sitting on the boards, trying to help them achieve growth and scalability, running my own business. And I got burned out, and one summer there was a hotel for sale in Surf City. And, it was one of those things where, it'd be interesting to see how that business model works. Like, what are the profit margins? What are the expenses and how can you make it more efficient? So I put an offer in to buy the hotel. It was Loggerhead Inn. It was an old historic Surf City, kind of a dive place. And years of deferred maintenance. So my plan was to lease it out to a property management company and kind of earn a coupon. At the same time, take that money and put it to work in other investments. Right. One thing led to another, and I had to rebuild the whole thing. So I had to double down the investment. But
do you
then
have those skills? Do you have construction?
It is all on the job.
Okay.
Yeah, I had no experience other than
I don't.
HGTV.
Right.
Now they have like a remodel hotel show. It's like they could have filmed me there at Loggerhead. So.
Yeah. Learn on the job through YouTube.
Yeah.
All right, so getting back to more of why the audience is here on investing in software firms, you're very active online, probably the most active investor online, posting on LinkedIn, and you actually had a post today. If these 3 things ring true with your software company, please contact me because I want to talk. Mm-hmm. Why don't more investors do that? Or do you get sometimes overwhelmed with the number of entrepreneurs that reach out? You seem like a very high energy guy. 'Cause
Yeah.
when I ping you at 3 a.m., I get something back.
Usually 6.
Yeah.
So the first question is why I do it. So I find myself in a unique position where I'm really an operator at heart, but I'm also an investor. So I understand from an operator's perspective what it means to lever your assets to run payroll, or to hire the next person, or to go out and build your customer acquisition strategy. So I understand those very well. Most VCs, in my opinion, from working in the area in Northern Virginia, and even like in Boston and New York, I've talked to, they are more financially driven. So they come from schools like Wharton and Harvard and Yale, and they look at financial models, and they look at predictive analytics, and they look at the TAMs and the market comparables, and they can make decisions based off of spreadsheets and software.
Right.
But you really can't make a proper decision without being on the front line and knowing exactly what your employees are doing and what it takes to earn a customer's dollar. So to me, I try to kind of lower the barrier to entry for companies that are looking to attract capital or think about raising capital, and just try to provide as much information as I possibly can, because there's, I understand that they're looking for capital for scalability because it drives innovation, it drives jobs. It's very important to the economy. So we shouldn't allow high barriers to entry just to raise capital or to network with those that have access to capital, to those that need capital.
Can I get an amen?
Yeah. So
you were at church. There we go. Go ahead.
But yeah, I also enjoy, giving back. I think it's important for people that have had some success to lever that and provide a roadmap or some hope in other people to achieve similar results. Because, what I've learned in the end, it's not about the success. It's about failure and about how to pivot from failure and what you learn from failure and the resilience that you obtain learning that process. So I try to take all those lessons learned in all my pain and failure and try to document it, and learning from other people and ask them, like, how did you do that? What steps did you take? What roadblocks did you hit? And try to articulate that or document that and then put it out there. Just so that if one person can read it and it provides valuable insight, like, for example, an individual that's here today shared their story and how one of the companies I invested in made a post, and I made a post about that reference, and then they ended up reading content about what I was doing and became inspired, and they're here today. So I think that's the network effect, and we all need to have a high growth mindset, and part of that growth mindset is trying to network with other like-minded individuals and try to learn as much as you can from them. So part of that is that, and plus it keeps me busy. It's intellectually stimulating for me. It allows me to learn new technologies and new industries and meet interesting people. So I'm very extroverted in that capacity, so I like to keep my mind busy.
Yeah. So let's stay on this theme. And what are 3 mistakes that entrepreneurs make when they reach out to investors? Because there's an awful lot of, as I think you put it, I reached out to the investor and got left on read. I didn't hear back. Maybe they even said, hey, reach out to me, but then I never hear back. So what do you think are 3 more common mistakes that we can prevent the people in the audience from making when they reach out to an investor?
There's some level of bias that we all carry, and the cognitive bias, where we believe that our solution or product is superior for XYZ reasons. And I think one of the key lessons learned in trying to network and try to generate attention for your product or service is to do proper market surveys and proper market due diligence. And that, again, goes to one of the things that I stress as far as like spending more time in strategy before you implement, because a lot of us get very motivated and we want to execute and go out and try to like hit the ground running.
Ready, fire, aim.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think spending more time learning about the product market fit and the customer's unmet need and really articulate that demand, because investors are looking for demand. They're not looking for you to solve the world's problems. They are looking for market opportunity and demand. So I think entrepreneurs may get ahead of their skis a little bit as far as not doing proper due diligence and being prepared to have a discussion about demand. And I think another aspect of that is trying to spend time with specific investors. Again, if, for example, if you're a healthcare software provider or solutions provider, you don't need to pivot or pitch your idea to a technology VC, because that they're never going to return your calls.
Right.
You really have to choose wisely the VCs or private equity or investors that have fully documented this is exactly where I invest in, so they understand the market and demand, so that you can try to make a correlation between what they're interested in and their passions and what you're trying to pitch.
So if you're a med device company, don't go to Canopy FinTech. That's not going to be a good use of your time. There are healthcare investors that are up in the triangle. There are some angels here in the area that invest, but just knowing that Canopy comes from Live Oak Bank and they are spinning out fintech companies.
Right.
Some of you know some other stories about Canopy, but we'll leave it at that. So let's talk about somebody who did it right, and Ohanify got your attention.
Right.
We know how that happened.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. But can you say, when you had that discussion, what turned it from I'm interested in talking to you as a startup to take my money, here's my investor check? What are some things that turned that conversation into a yes?
Yeah, that was an interesting story. So as you know, I read about Ohanify in the Raleigh Business Journal, which they wrote about the business model, and I was very moved by the story and about
Tarboro Brewing or of Natalie's?
Natalie.
Okay.
Yeah, and also the software.
Okay.
And coming from a government contracting sector, I had no experience in beverage. I know software, but interesting segment. So I reached out to her on LinkedIn and I congratulated her on the article. I introduced myself and I told her that I'm in the community and love to stop by and just have a meeting and get a demo of your software.
Right.
And she brought me in, and over a 3-hour session, she really broke it down to a point where I could understand the software. I was very impressed that it was built on Salesforce and the analytics. And I immediately, knowing from my perspective, like they were focused on one vertical, but I could see 6 other verticals that this software could solve.
Okay.
And I told her that.
I think they're touching on cannabis now is one vertical that I've seen.
The beverage? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So we hit it off, and then I offered to have a strategy session with them and said, if you would like, bring the whole team together and let's spend a half a day whiteboarding your top 3 problems. They brought me back, and we spent a good 3-4 hours where we were kind of just deep diving into their top 3 problems. And again, I don't know anything about the industry, and I just said, well, here's what I would do if I were you. So I would give them some ideas, and they said, thank you very much. And then they went away. And of course, I was hoping that maybe one of them would be fine and they would bring me back and say, well, you want to be an investor or an advisor?
Right.
But I got a call from Ian about 3 weeks later, and he says, can you come back? And I said, sure. And he goes, I want to tell you that we implemented all 3 of your suggestions and they solved all of our problems. I'm like, no shit.
Right.
I was like, that's awesome.
Right,
I was like,
right.
wow. So then I'm like, well, what's next? And then he says, well, we're thinking about doing your friends and family. And I said, well, do you want me to help? And he goes, you want to? I said, sure. So then I helped them kind of restructure their business, got them legal support, went through the whole process, went through a valuation exercise. One of the investors had a different opinion, and we, kind of agreed on a valuation that everybody made happy. And they allowed me to invest at that point. And Then a year later, we did a bridge, and business has really taken off for those guys, and I'm very proud and happy for them. And we're looking to possibly do an A round, I'd say, in the next few months.
Yeah.
So
this is really one of the success stories. This is why the ecosystem exists. Is you have UNCW graduates that went to work at Encino, that learned Salesforce software, and then after the Encino IPO, they broke off and started their own company. And that is really kind of the full circle flywheel, if you will, of what we're trying to create in any ecosystem. This is just a great example that Richard played a part in. So thank you for that story.
yeah, absolutely.
So I saw an investor, a female investor recently said, if you're trying to meet an investor at an event, she wants to hear 3 things in that elevator pitch. She wants to hear about your team, your traction, and your industry that you're in.
Mm-hmm.
Would you agree with that? As you know, you have that 30-second handshake meeting, like you had 7 of these before we got started today.
Right.
Are those the 3 right things to get the attention of the investor?
I would say team, traction, and market opportunity are the 3 for me.
Size?
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, obviously, having a solid A team is paramount because you're not really making an investment in the business or the idea. You're more or less investing in the team and the team's capacity to win. So you can have the most awesome team in a very small market, and you're not going to get the gains that investors are looking for. But then again, you can have, you know, this most awesome market opportunity, but not a solid team. So I think it goes hand in hand. And obviously, once you have a solid team, traction, in my opinion, comes through customer acquisition. And so they really have to hone the customer acquisition skills, which again goes back to early validation. So for me personally, when I make an investment, I usually make an investment after validation happens, not before validation, because otherwise you're just investing in a pitch. So like with Ohanify, when I first met those guys, they had 13 customers. And I knew for a fact that it was going to be over 100 in no time at all, as long as we just kind of get them in shape. So it's sort of like, okay, you've already built your MVP, you've got customer validation, you're generating revenue. Okay, now's the time we can start building the scalability aspect of it. So you're not trying to validate your market.
Right.
You're trying to actually build your company for scaling.
Can we talk about, you warned me not to get too deep on Ohanify, so you can tase me if this question is wrong, and that would really entertain the audience, by the way. Can you say what your investment went towards, or what did that first round of capital really invest in? What was it for? Was it to add team member sales? Was it to perfect the product? What was it for?
It was for customer acquisition.
Okay.
Yeah, so they were about 15, 16 employees. They were working in an office around the corner. So we had a game plan of getting a proper office. And then once we did that, it was all about customer acquisition. So if we could spend $1 to earn 2 or 3, that was the key. So
if you don't know, they moved into the old Untapped headquarters downtown. So they're in a very interesting building, which has some very interesting history. If you don't know the history of that building, that's where Bruce Lee's son died filming the Crow. So Brandon Lee was much like it was an accidental shooting on the movie set.
Yeah.
So in your post, you talk about growth occurs at the edge of discomfort.
Yeah.
What does that mean to you as our entrepreneurs kind of wiggle in their seat? What does that mean to you?
So comfort, in my opinion, is the enemy of growth. When you get too comfortable, you become complacent. When you become complacent, you become unmotivated, and then you just kind of stagnate. And that goes for individuals and businesses. You really have to provide that high growth mindset, which again, you have to push yourself or surround yourself with individuals that are going to push you. And growth is uncomfortable. I mean, think about in the gym, if you're trying to increase your your max, you're going to experience pain, lifting weights or climbing a mountain. You could climb a small mountain and be fine, but if you try a large mountain, it's going to be painful. So, I mean, there is a level of discomfort, when it comes to learning new technology or learning a new language or learning a new industry. But I think that's where growth happens. Like, it's where the magic happens. It's on the edge of discomfort. Me doing my doctorate program a couple of years ago. Why? I have no idea, but it was very uncomfortable. Like, writing a dissertation sucked, but I did it, and I got through it, and it was awful. But now I can check that box off.
And that was at Purdue.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah.
So in your LinkedIn post, you say separate information from emotion. What advice do you have to help entrepreneurs understand this concept? Because entrepreneurs are very emotional about their startup. It is their baby. How do you separate information from that emotion?
Well, it's really a proper negotiating strategy, but we're all emotional in our decision making, and you have to separate information from influence. We're always influenced everywhere we go, and I think we just need to focus on the facts and information and try to understand what are the issues that we need to focus on without emotional bias, and then try to make a proper decision. It is very emotional in business and operating a business, selling a business. So you just have to be very disciplined and develop those proper habits to build consistency on trying to make the best decision without having that type of bias. It's difficult, it takes practice, but over time you start to realize, like, wait a minute, is this a fact or is it influence? Just take a step back before you make a decision, and then you can try to narrow it down. But I hate to use the political spectrum, but there is a lot of influence happening on both sides. A lot of fear-mongering, a lot of, if you do this, this is going to happen. Yeah. You have to eliminate the egos and the emotions and just say, what are the issues? What are you going to do? What are the decisions? And then make your decision based on that. Yeah.
This is my last question. Well, I have two more questions, and then we'll open it up to the audience. On a recent post, you had side by side how entrepreneurs had invested the money that the investors put into the company, and one talked about spending too much on office space, but the other company had gotten office space too. So, what are some of the things that you can warn the entrepreneurs in the room? Say, investing in that really isn't the best use of the money. So what have you seen? When you're investing, what are you okay with the entrepreneurs spending the investor dollars on?
Yeah, the one bad example I had was a company out of Baltimore, and they had just raised $2 million. And for the first 6 months, they went on a hiring spree. So they hired 25 new employees. They got brand new offices, new equipment, new chairs, new desks, new computers. And they didn't properly calculate what that run rate was going to jump to. They had a concept and say, the run rate's going to be $85,000 a month, and then raising this money will give us 2.5 years of runway. Well, when you add 25 new employees, right, even if they're making 40, 50, 60K a year, some part-time, full-time, that runway skyrocketed. And at the same time, the revenue wasn't meeting the expectation. So in the other example, we tied the expenses to the revenue. So it's okay to spend money and to do those things, but you got to have some discipline in order to make sure that your receivables are matching your payables. And it's all about cash flow. And if you allow your payables to outrace your receivables, then your cash flow is going to shrink really, really fast. And then you're going to be forced to either take an expensive bridge, right, which is right, very dilutive, and it pisses all the early investors off. And it's also a bruise on the ego of the leadership, because you don't want to have your management team be, kind of talked down to, well, you can't properly manage your book, Right, right. But I think tying your payables and expenses to growth and making smart investments, because again, you have to make the investments to make your company grow and scale. And that requires human capital, It requires physical capital, and sometimes it requires getting an office. Now with remote, it's a little different. You know, we can work from home. There's technology that'll enable that. But this is going back before COVID,
Sure.
so it's a little apples oranges mix. But again, the concept is having discipline around your financials, making sure that your receivables and payables are always aligned, and having that structure in place and articulate that to your investors so they can then have confidence in knowing what you're doing.
Last question. So, Richard and I had not met before today. We've talked a lot online. We've had one phone conversation.
Yeah.
But you're very supportive of what we do.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
Yeah.
can you, from the ecosystems that you've experienced in other cities, do you have any suggestions for what we need to do to give our ecosystem some maturity? With our limited resources, what can we add to our ecosystem?
I mean, doing the events like this, where you have opportunities to meet investors and to meet operators and learn from their past mistakes and successes, is critical. But then also inviting other networks into the community, because coming from DC, nobody knows about this market, which I'm kind of glad a little bit, because like I want them to kind of stay away and like, you know, hey. But that's me personally, but also for the community, they need that exposure too, because, you know, they can then network with other VCs and understand maybe they're interested in life sciences, maybe they're interested in AI, maybe they're interested in data science. Well, there is a tremendous amount of innovations happening here. And, you know, it could be the best kept secret, but it also could be the best liability.
Right.
And I think we just need to make a decision on what's best for the community and the market. And again, reaching out to Raleigh, Charlotte, DC, we're all kind of in that 3 to 6 hour travel, and it's not far. Even Atlanta, a group that I just joined called VC in DC, they're trying to hit all the major markets between Florida, Georgia, and Maryland. I actually send them your information.
Yep.
So I hope they.
But with a warning that maybe I don't want them to come in and.
I didn't say that. I told you that. They're good guys.
Okay.
It's just, you know, they bring a little bit of bias, you know. And again, this is one of the things I hate about this industry is like, there's this concept where some VCs think they're better than other people just because they're playing with other people's money. And to me, it's like, you know what, you're just like the rest of us.
Right.
And if you want to put money to work and help the companies in this area grow and prosper, then be real, come down, have great conversations. We need more people to come here to share their experiences and provide network. And that's the only way to do it. And I think conferences, you know, partnership with UNC Wilmington, trying to invite some of the Raleigh and Charlotte people here to have conferences.
Well, we all know Charlotte doesn't really leave Charlotte. You must go to Charlotte to.
Well,
that's kind of how Charlotte.
again,
we call it the great. Well, you're new to the area, so we call it the great state of Mecklenburg.
Yeah.
It's its own state.
So
yeah.
we have to break those barriers down, because again, they want to put money to work and charge fees and success and grow more funds.
Yeah.
Entrepreneurs need access to capital so they can create jobs, innovation, and have a success and an exit. So it is a win-win. It shouldn't be like an arm wrestling contest.
Yeah.
So we have to find a way to lower the barriers to entry on both sides and have realistic conversations and opportunities where we can network and grow together. That's the only way to do it. Leadership and some experience behind leadership. I'll give you an example. 10 years ago, my very first investment was these two guys that were ex-Army Rangers. They just went to Harvard and got their MBA. And they were basically selling a concept called Troop Swap, where it was Groupon for the military. And you know, again, I'm the only tech guy in a room of about 17 other cashed out entrepreneurs, and they're just like, I don't understand the model, blah, blah, blah. This is, you know, 2010. And I wasn't really moved by the idea. I mean, I like it. You know, it's an interesting concept. Groupon for the military, I get it. It's a big closed network. They need that network and that opportunity. But I was really moved by Blake Hall, who was the co-founder. His experience, the story he told about the tours of duty he did in Iraq and the individuals he met over there, I was impressed. His leadership capability and what he was able to accomplish. And I knew right then that if he had success on the battlefield and he understands the network very well in the military, then whether it's Groupon for the military or whatever it is, he's going to be successful. So I went all in on that one. I went big, like six-figure big. And it almost wasn't an investment because at the time Blue Venture needed 9 partners to make the deal. We had 8. So I had to beg somebody to throw $10,000 into the deal to make the deal happen. But again, that story was a success because 2-3 years later, Blake pivoted from Groupon to authentication. And now it's ID.me. It's now a $1.8 billion company. We invested at $7.5 million. So it's like a 200x. I mean, it's insane. And that was my very first one out of the gate. So of course now I'm wrecked. You know, like, oh my God, this is great, you know. But there's been failures too. I mean, they're not all of them are going to win. You know, I had another one that I put 6 figures in and it failed. And the reason it failed is because, you know, time is the enemy of all deals. And the thing you can't focus on is time and market shifts because innovation always happens. The market's always evolving. And just because your product can solve the problem today may not solve the problem 5 years from now. And that's what's happening a lot is they make expectations that they can capture all this data in 3 to 5 years or this traction, and the market's not moving that fast, and you have to be patient. Just like with Ohanify, you know, they have to be patient. It's going to come. It's just not going to come tomorrow. So you have to look at the team. You know, battle tested. Are they, you know, leadership capabilities? You know, mentally, are they capable? You know, through the hard times? Because there's winners in business, just like there is in seasons, and you have to get through the hard times. And I look for those type of experienced leaders that can deliver both in good and hard times and that can be understandable and coachable. You know, I've had another great example. I made an investment in a company at a 3.5 million valuation, and 12 months goes by. He kicks us out and does his own A round at this company in Ohio, and he becomes an a-hole. And to me, that's a red flag. Like, I'm out. Like, I don't care how good the business is. If you're not coachable and you're not a good person to work with, I'm out. Like, I'm just not wasting my time. Well, I sold out 3.5 times my money. It was a great win. Like, it's a success. That company's now worth $1.2 billion. So again, if I would have just left my money in, it'd have been great. But again, I have my own structure. He violated it. I'm out. So whether it's a success, failure, you got to have your own standards and just live by it. Discipline builds habits. Habits build consistency. Consistency builds results. And that's the only way to do it. So to have that kind of mindset as a leader, as a business manager, that's the ticket.
There's a question here.
Looking for your industry experience in SaaS and the big topic of AI. How do you see SaaS multiples changing over the next 3 or 5 years, given the commodification of software development?
It's a great question. It's a very hot topic, you know, in a lot of circles, especially out in California. In my opinion, I think there's going to be a tremendous amount of disruption. You know, AI is moving so fast, and now that's open source, and you have these LLMs that are being created, and all these applications are being built on top of it. I do think there's going to be a whole new application stack layer that's being built on top of LLMs that's going to replace traditional SaaS models. So it's an interesting space, and it's one of our major themes as an investment. But again, it goes back to traction and demand and customer switching costs, because there is a switching cost. Because if a customer is ingrained in a technology and they spent millions of dollars of training and implementation, just because a new technology can come and save them 8% in operating cost, there's a switching cost. So you have to be able to watch the market and figure out, like, when that switching cost comes to a point where it's worth that investment, then you're going to see major disruption. I don't think we're there yet. But I do think we're on their way. It could be another 3 to 5, 6 years. But I mean, watching OpenAI and some of these other large tech companies just completely dominate the AR market and replace traditional applications, it's fascinating. But it's also interesting. You know, I think we need to embrace.
How is companies going to exit? If they already have a $15 billion valuation and they really haven't done much yet, how are you going to exit from that investment at $15 billion valuation?
It's a great point. I mean, literally, sometimes they take acquisitions that could be higher or lower than some of these investments. I mean, there's a lot of private investments. Like, you know, one of the things I do is I buy private place stock on brokers. And sometimes those people can cash out, like SpaceX, for example. There's a tremendous amount of ex-employees selling shares on the you know, the closed market. Whether or not the valuation catches up with the price,
Right.
who knows? But it was so awesome 2 weeks ago to see those chopsticks, you know, catch that booster. I mean, I was so inspired to watch that. And I got an email today about it saying, oh my God, these people from New York are buying $225 a share. That's insane. That's like triple the valuation. I mean, but people are just rushing into these things. But I think it's, you know, scarcity drives valuation. So if there's a low float and there's a lot of demand, then it drives the price up so people can exit.
Yeah.
Obviously the traditional market, the IPO, but
Right.
I do think like AI and the way things are going, there's going to be companies that go out of business. And there's going to be some zeros.
Are there more questions from the audience? Come on, there's some entrepreneurs here. Yep, Nanette.
So, a little bit different, you know, you talked about your story with Ohanify, and you found her from a story in Triangle Business Journal, and you reached out to her. So, I think when we talk about all this hard work, the entrepreneurs are trying to raise funds and make calls, a well-placed story describing somebody, like, that stood out to you.
It did.
So tell me, is that something, that's something any entrepreneur can do? And you know, if they could get picked up by a certain news media, what kind of things would you want an entrepreneur, like a story, to be told? Like, what can you tell an entrepreneur to do to try to draw the attention from you?
Right. The key aspects of that story that drove me to call Natalie, and it was personal. There's a little bit of personal story about her background and how she pivoted her career, working in one industry and jumping into another. I felt that was ambitious. And I thought, here's an individual that's got a high growth mindset, that's taking risk and making the best of the situation that she was in. To me, that's admirable. I find that highly attractive of a person. And then I read more about the software and more about the industry itself. And I'm like, I have to meet this person, because here's an individual that's going to take life by the throat and say, not today. You know, I'm not going to roll over and, you know, just take it what I can get. I'm going to make the best of the situation and improve my life the best I can. And to me, that was moving. So when I'm looking for opportunities, obviously there's going to be a story about how the business was created, how it was involved, what's the demand, what's the future aspects of that, and what are you trying to solve? Like another thing that in that story drove me was the fact that brewery owners were spending 60, 70 hours a week running their business, you know, manning the books and doing the manufacturing and all this other stuff. There's a lot of things happening on that logistical side, not just serving beer and making customers happy, but in the back office, there's a lot going on. And to me, I'm like, wow, I had no idea. Kind of like that hotel in Surf City, like, interesting. You're always learning different business models. But then how this software could not only improve profitability, like it could actually make your profits better by implementing the software, but it could return time to the owner. So to me, as a business owner, if I could spend less time and make more money, that's a compelling story. So I had to learn more about that. So that's what really drove me to see her. But I think reaching out to the community, speaking engagements, podcasts, trying to do like discussions like this, talking about your business, why I've got started, what we're doing, why it's important, why customers are going to come use our stuff. Those are the things that drive demand. And some people get it, some people don't. And I'm a software guy, so I totally was like locked into what they were doing. So.
Question is, I've got a list of books. Some of you guys have it on your seat. Which of these 3 books would you recommend the entrepreneurs pick up first as a mandatory reading assignment with some homework in the future?
All right, I'm going to be a little different. Okay, so the first book I would recommend really reading is The 47 Laws of Power. That book has helped me so much in understanding psychology and about working with other people and trying to deliver and meet expectations. I understand it's not allowed in prisons for a reason. Like it's banned in prisons. You can't find this book.
How do you know that, Richard? Let's dig deeper into that.
It's on Google. But that is a phenomenal book, and I will tell you that I did violate one of those laws, and it cost me dearly. And I learned the lesson. It's powerful. The other one, number 2, is a book called Surrounded by Idiots. It's a book that I had to read in my doctorate program. It really breaks down the psychology of individual behaviors and the different personality types, and it gives you some really helpful topics on how to talk to certain people, because it really does break people down into 4 categories. And if you can effectively communicate with those individuals, you can have greater success. And the final one, you said 3,
Yes, sir.
Why Startups Fail. Tom Eiselman is a professor at Harvard, and he teaches a class called Launching Technical Ventures. And one of the things that I find fascinating is case studies, whether it's success or failure, but I want to focus on the failure. I want to know why it failed, how it failed, what steps did they take, what were some of the lessons learned and the decisions. You want to learn from other people's mistakes and failures so that you don't have the same issue. So that's really kind of where it all starts, is learning from failure, because you really don't fail because you're learning the whole time. So you can't categorize it as failure, it's learning. And 2 weeks ago I was at Purdue, having a talk to the entrepreneur class, and I challenged them to fail. I'm like, you must fail. Like, kids today are so fearful of failing for some reason. I'm like, you need to fail. Whatever it is, go fail. Go do something 10 times and expect 9 no's and 1 yes. But that 1 yes is going to come at the cost of 9 no's. You wouldn't get that yes unless you had 9 no's. Embrace the pain, embrace failure, because that's where you learn, and that's how you get better over time. So that's the 3.
I think it's important failure is not permanent. The word, I think, to most entrepreneurs, until you said what you just explained, the word failure means stop. Fail is such a end of thing word. I failed.
Yeah.
And I'm going to move on to a completely different thing because this
Well,
failed.
it's emotional.
Yeah,
just
right.
like my 10th grader. I mean, she failed a geometry test, and she got all upset about it and said, maybe math is not my subject. I'm like, no, math is your subject. You didn't fail, you learned. You learned what you need to do to go forward. So now let's learn what we did wrong, and let's make the mistake, and let's make the adjustment so that the next time you do it, you won't have that problem. So
You're a much better parent than I am. That's really good.
Having 3 kids and 2 of them girls.
Okay.
There's a reason I'm gray early. So
One last question. Was there one in the back too? Okay.
Yeah, real quick. I mean, I think it would be amazing to have 10 guys like you move into this ecosystem. And obviously you have some investments here, but was there anything, what appealed to you about moving here that we could replicate possibly and find more guys like you who would want to move in and help stimulate the ecosystem that these 2 are leading in
Right.
such an effective way?
there's 2 reasons, personal and professional. Personal, I grew up coming here every summer. So to me, it's nostalgia. It reminds me of my grandparents. I was really close to them, and we spent a considerable amount of time here. So to me, it's kind of like an attachment to the family. And of course, I've got my house in Topsail Beach, and I eventually want to live here full time, whether it's there, sell that, move closer in, whatever. I love this market. I love this area. Professionally speaking, I think economically, this is going to be a high growth market because inflation is persistent. New entry home prices are expensive in other markets like Atlanta, Boston, Charlotte. So if you're a kid coming out of college, what better place to come and start your career than Wilmington? Because it's economically sensitive, comparable to other markets. Lifestyle's awesome. It's low key. You don't have to worry about stress. I mean, the beach is close. The weather's phenomenal. The people are wonderful. I don't think there's a better place, in my opinion. You know, and I tell my kids all the time, like my 10th grader, I said, I hope you apply to UNC Wilmington. Like, please. Like, you know, she wants to play volleyball. So we're like, okay, if that's what you want to do. But, you know, I think it's a wonderful place, and it's why I make the investment both with commercial real estate, and I want to have Cape Fear Ventures headquartered here. I mean, we just closed an investment in Kansas City. We just made another one in Virginia. So, I mean, we're going all over the country making investments, but our headquarters are here. This is home.
Can your daughter skip a couple grades?
Well, we're discussing that, you know. So
Geometry class.
right. Yeah,
The thing that makes that happen are success stories. It's Encino having an IPO, and maybe Aperture has an IPO. It's about David Reeser and Opiate having an exit. It's about George Taylor and Untapped having a multiple exit of their investment. And the success stories, telling those stories attract more resources. So when I beg the damn Business Journal to write more startup stories, it's not about telling the Wilmington story in Wilmington. I need the press so I can send that out to the world and have somebody go, I got a call this week from Austin, Texas. Jim, this is Reagan, her name's Reagan from Austin, Texas. I'm reading about all the shit you're doing. Can you tell me how you're doing this? And I'm like, I studied Austin, Texas to learn how I'm doing now. Like, you know, the oddity that Austin, Texas is calling me about the success of our ecosystem was mind-blowing to me. So it's about us telling our story, and I'm begging you, as if this is a free event, please tell our story. Please go on LinkedIn tonight, take a picture with your new hat, and say, I was at this great event tonight in Wilmington, North Carolina, because you explaining that as a group has a lot more impact than me and everyone's going, oh, Jim's telling another story again. I need you guys to tell our story, and we're having a great event tonight. As I say every month, every city in the world wants this event tonight. They want to figure out how to put 90 people in a room in their ecosystem, because this isn't happening anywhere else. We have the largest attendance on a monthly basis in the whole state of North Carolina. That's bigger than Charlotte, that's bigger than Raleigh. And the reason for that is Raleigh has 40 organizations, so they are fragmented in their ecosystem. They don't have one big organization that has great events. They have one big organization and they have one event. So this is magical. You know, I know you guys are tired of me saying that, but it is true. People are researching what we're doing, and you guys look at me like I have 7 heads and 8 arms like an octopus, but I'm telling you the truth. I get contacted on a weekly basis going, how the hell did you pull this off?
Yeah.
So that being said, we have to end it there.